Long time no talk, Miami Dolphins fans. How are we doing today? It is Ben Morgan of the Fins Up Network. Survived the Dolphins Packers game, survived the cold weather. The only thing I didn't do was bring home a Miami Dolphins victory. So I'll take my portion of the blame for that. Regardless, still had a great time. It was great to meet up and actually interact with some other Miami Dolphins fans in the state of Wisconsin as well. So thank you to all of those that we were able to interact with when we were out there. But now it is time to move forward because the fact that I didn't come home with a win means what? We're basically in the playoffs now, right? I mean, we need the Broncos to lose two. We need to win out. We'd hold the tiebreaker over the Broncos. But you basically you win and you got a decent chance, an okay chance. You lose and you're done. So this is unfortunately our playoffs, Dolphins fans. But hey, this is the world that we find ourselves in now. After Tua put himself in harm's way, we had a couple of games throughout the season that teetering on winning, but couldn't do it. So, hey, this is the bed we've made. Now we got to try to find a way. And it starts, it continues this week against the New York Jets. Fortunately for us, a team that's also going through it. Man, they had some expectations coming into this year, and they are not living up to them. And we are going to get into all of that in here in 1 second. Before we do, though, you haven't gotten subscribed yet, make sure you are doing that. Would definitely appreciate that. In the comments as well, if you have any thoughts, any questions about this Miami Dolphins team, about this upcoming game, go ahead and drop them in the comments. Because I've got a crazy schedule this week, I actually don't know if I'm going to get to my typical second preview prediction video. If I don't, I will answer all of your questions right there in the comments as well. So if you've got anything, go ahead and throw it in there as well. I am going to bypass the injury report. I am recording this on it's Thursday afternoon. The second injury report of the week just came out. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'll hit on a couple of things as we jump into it, but I got a lot I want to get to today. So let's just jump right into the action. Let's start with talking about this Jets offense. So you might ask yourself, how's it going? Like, how's it going for Aaron Rodgers? How's it going for the Jets and their fans this year? I think this summarizes it perfectly. Their interim head coach, let's start with that, putting an emphasis on the word interim, which means they already let go of one guy, had to answer questions earlier this week about who his starting quarterback would even be this upcoming Sunday against the Dolphins. So yeah, that sort of summarizes how's it going for this Jets team, for their offense specifically as well. Quite honestly, it's sort of hard to even wrap your head around the struggles that this Jets passing offense has had this year. Let's break this down a little bit. You got Garrett Wilson, in my opinion, one of the better young wide receivers in the game. They go ahead before the deadline. They trade for Davante Adams, one of the wide receivers that historically Aaron Rodgers had had the most success with throughout his career. But guess what? It's just not clicking. At least it's not clicking the way they thought it would. And you ask yourself, what do you chalk that up to? What could possibly be going wrong now? I think there are a multitude of things, but the number one thing that I see as an outsider, it's age. Father Time remains undefeated, right? And Aaron Rodgers, and coming back from that Achilles injury, that escapability, that maneuverability that he had to always create outside of the pocket in Green Bay when things broke down. He can't extend plays. He can't create off script because of that injury and coming back from it so fast. So I will say that a part of me is always at least maybe a little bit scared when I see Aaron Rodgers on the schedule, because we've seen it time and time again, what this guy is truly capable of doing. The problem is for Jets fans, especially any of you watching, I don't need to break this news to you, that fear comes from what he did when he was in Green Bay. He's really never done anything in a Jets uniform to warrant that type of fear in a team that he's playing. So it's kind of convoluted right now when it comes to the offense. And then you look at their ground game. It's the Breece Hall show. You got a little bit of Braylon Allen sprinkled in. Once again, that's a duo that preseason, offseason, like, man, that's good. I love that pick of Braylon Allen. I think he complements a guy like Breece Hall very well. On paper, that looks good. Once again, they're somehow 30th in the league in rushing yards per game. Now, some of that lack of production is on the offensive line. Some of that goes to situational football. Obviously, you're not running the ball when you're trailing as much in the season as a team like the Jets has. But producing under 90 rushing yards per game, That falls under my expectation. I'm sure it falls under your expectation. It 100% falls under the expectations that the Jets front office, coaching staff, players had coming into the season. And also, we talked about sprinkling in some injury talk. You got Breece Hall, who was a DNP in practice both Wednesday and Thursday. So another huge thing to monitor for this Jets offense, at least for the remainder of the week leading up to game day. Receiving wise, we talked about Wilson and Adams. There's obviously the top two options. Once again, we're talking about production falling under expectations, especially these expectations that were there once they traded for Davante Adams. Now, I will say that both of these guys, they can still beat you at any point in time. I absolutely loved Garrett Wilson's college tape coming out of Ohio State. I will 100% say that his best football is ahead of him. I truly do believe that. And then you got Davante Adams, who, yeah, I think we'd all agree is probably past his prime. Still a veteran wide receiver that can get it done. He can still beat you at all three levels. But I think the key against this Jets passing offense, for what there is of it, pressure up the middle on passing downs. I'm looking at you, Zach Sieler, Benito Jones, Calais, Campbell. Basically, don't allow Aaron Rodgers to step up into that pocket. Because if you can get that instant early pressure up the middle, get in his face, get into those throwing lanes, he's shown that he was going to take sacks this year. He's going to make those off-target throws this year because he can't escape outside. In the past, when I've watched the Jets this year, you get that pressure up the middle. He maybe tries to kind of go around the outside. If those edge rushers get any sort of push whatsoever, he's running into them. He's taking a sack. All right, let's talk about the Jets defense and our offense. Who nearly dead center in the league in points allowed per game, but fourth in total yards per game and second in passing yards allowed per game as well. Their statistical weakness is against the run. They rank 20th. They're allowing over 125 yards per game on the ground. So the bad news, not breaking news here, we haven't run the ball well the last 4 games. I think over the last 3 or 4 games, we're under like 3 yards per carry. So yeah, I don't think our offensive line, our coaching staff, our running backs, they're not oozing with confidence in the ground game right now. But the good news is what I just said. The Jets, if there's a statistical weakness, it's against the run. So maybe facing a defense that has a couple of these issues against the run, maybe that's what we need to get things going back in this department. And actually, they're statistically worse on the road against the run as they are just in any game or at home. They actually are ranked 24th against the run in their road games. However, in that Thanksgiving game against the Green Bay Packers, did you notice which Miami Dolphins running back didn't get any carries? That's Jalen Ramsey. I'm sure you noticed that. Was that Mike McDaniel's way of punishing him for that fumble that he and Skylar Thompson had the week before against the Patriots? We will see, but I'm going to be curious to see how these touches get distributed now moving forward with him and Mostert, because we know Mostert had his issues as well. Guess what? Someone's going to have to spell Devon Achane, but I say spell because I think we've hit the point that there's not another running back on this team that's going to put like a significant dent into a guy like Devon Achane's workload. I saw a stat recently. He is the only player in the NFL with 200 plus combined carries and targets that doesn't have a single drop or a fumble this season. Pretty dependent, pretty impressive stat. The thing I would say, haven't seen from Achane so far yet this year, he's had some good plays. He's had explosive plays. He just hasn't seen those like long, explosive touchdown runs. Now, I feel like he's been super close, but that's just one thing that, man, I think at some point in time, if he pops one of those off, that's going to help instill some confidence into him, into this offensive line. But how about that ability as a receiving back? Who, if you've been listening to the Fins Up Network, we talked a lot this offseason about the Miami Dolphins wanting to get this guy going as a pass-catching back in that department. Now, we just said it. He doesn't have a single drop, and he leads all NFL running backs with 6 receiving touchdowns. None to add this to it as well. He leads all Miami Dolphins players with 6 receiving touchdowns as well. That includes Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Jonnu Smith. But let's talk a little bit about that Dolphins passing game. I also found another interesting stat while I was prepping for this week. The New York Jets are second in passing yards allowed per game, but they rank just 28th in estimated points added per defensive back. Now, EPA is kind of one of those high next level stats that a lot of people are using right now. So they are 28th in EPA per defensive back, and they're allowing the 9th most yards per attempt since week 7 of this season. Now, the Jets also run the 4th most man coverage and the 7th most single high safety. A lot of kind of contrast to what we've been seeing lately from defenses. And Tyreek Hill has statistically been better this year against teams that play man, against teams that have that single high safety. So, man, are we in line maybe for that Tyreek Hill breakout game that I think we've all been missing and wanting? We've had success in the passing game. We've seen the growth of the tight end. I think kind of selfishly, we want some boom plays. We want some exciting plays. Is this the week that we get that from Tyreek Hill? Because keep in mind, Sauce Gardner, we talked about injuries, DNP on Wednesday and Thursday with a hamstring injury. And I believe one of the coaches said, you know what, rushing back from a hamstring injury against these type of wide receivers, by these type, I mean super fast wide receivers, not always in your best interest. So we'll see how that goes for the Jets. I honestly don't see us venturing too far away from what the game plan has been over the last, let's say, month or so, which has essentially featured a lot of passing. Look at Tua's last 3 games. 365 yards, 2 touchdowns, 317 yards, 4 touchdowns, 288 yards, 3 touchdowns. Now, I will say that the key, making those completions, making those yards, making all that stuff matter, make it count when it matters. Our offense was clicking. We were extending drives. We were finishing with points. We were not punting in those games against the Raiders and the Patriots. Well, then we traveled to Green Bay, and it's in the first half. It's a field goal, it's 2 punts, and it's a turnover on downs. We go into halftime down 24-3. Guess who's depressed? All of us, but I'm depressed and cold sitting there in the stadium. We got to get back offensively, passing game-wise, extending drives, eliminating these drive-killing penalties. We saw it early in that Green Bay Packers game as well on Thanksgiving. Be able to have that balanced attack between the run and the passing game. I think that's a huge thing going into this game against the Jets. Dolphins fans, like I said, I'm going to try my best to get another preview and prediction video out yet this week. I just can't promise anything because my schedule is an absolute bear. But like I said, you know the drill. If you've got any questions that I'll either hit on in that video or I can hit them in the comments, go ahead and drop them in there. Get subscribed if you haven't done so already. In case this is the last time I talk to you before Sunday, Dolphins fans, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the game, and we will be back at some point after the game, a recap in that puppy as well. Hopefully a Miami Dolphins win. We got to get right back into this, Dolphins fans. All right, we'll kill it there for today, Dolphins fans. And until next time, Fins